So in the last lecture, you learned about two ways to create animations. Now let's see how we can build animations in our Angular apps. So as I told you before, in Angular, we have a module called Angular/animations. In this module, we have a bunch of helper functions for creating animations such as trigger, transition, state, animate, and so on. Before we explore these functions in detail, let's take a look at the anatomy of an animation. Look at this illustration. What you see here is the concept behind every animation. Whether you're a programmer or an animator, you're dealing with the same concept. So what does this mean? This means an element, or here more accurately, a DOM element, can be in any given state. Let's say state 1. In this state, it has a certain look and feel. Perhaps its background is blue. Now, during an animation, it transitions to a different state, and in this state, it has a different look. Perhaps its background is now yellow. This is the anatomy of every animation. We have various states. In each state, our element has a different look, and during an animation, it transitions from one state to another. Okay? Now, what are these states? Well, in Angular, we have three kinds of states. We have the void state, the default state, and custom states. Let's explore each of these. The void state represents the state of an element that is not part of the DOM. And this can happen when an element is created but not placed in the DOM yet, or when it's removed from the DOM. Here's a real-world example. Think of a to-do list. Every time we add an item in the list, the corresponding element is first created, but it's not in the DOM yet. So it's in the void state. Then it transitions from this state into a new state. Similarly, when we delete an item from the list, the corresponding element transitions from its current state into the void state. So here, this asterisk represents what we call the default state. So all elements do have a default state. Now back to the list of states. One more time, we have three types of states: the void state, the default state, which is indicated by an asterisk, and also custom states. We don't always use custom states because they only make sense in certain scenarios. For example, think of a zippy or an accordion component. This component is always visible in the view, but its state can change from collapsed to expanded. So if you want to implement an animation during this transition, then we'll have to work with two custom states here: collapsed and expanded. So this is the big picture. Now let's take a look at the implementation. Let's say we want to apply an animation to each to-do item in a list. We start with the component's metadata. Here we have a property called animation, which takes an array. In this array, we register one or more triggers. Each trigger has a name and an implementation. In this implementation, we define all the states and transitions for that kind of animation. So these functions you see here, like trigger, state, and transition, these are the helper functions that are defined in Angular/animations module. You're going to see this in action soon. So here we have a trigger called fade in. Now we can apply this trigger on any DOM element using this notation. So we use an @ followed by the trigger name. So this is the big picture. Next, we'll create our first animation.